interact with people who have the experience and pull information from them and learn. So this is the first construct or container that I want you to just make a note of. The second one is R&D intensity. The point here is that firms with developed internal information resources, that's R&D labs, policies and procedures, codes of conduct, etc., tend to have higher levels of internal knowledge and are more likely to use a combination of acquisitions and internal innovation to grow. Isn't that interesting, right? The point here is that organizations that are well-structured, seasoned, have mechanisms for passing information along through policies, procedures, guidelines, tend to have better results when it comes to acquisitions and also tend to do better when it comes to growing organically. R&D intensity tends to increase the efficiency of acquisitions by reducing the cost associated with a steep learning curve. So a new CEO coming into a position, if there is a wealth of information already in place, rules and roadmaps to follow, is unlikely to make all the mistakes he or she would make without that kind of guidance. The other one is complementarity. Now, this construct is talking about the level of complementarity, the fit between the target that's being looked at and the firm that's doing the acquiring. Venetia mentioned at the start that acquisitions can be like a marriage, right? The idea is if you find somebody who's more compatible with you, the marriage is more likely to last, right? Last the long term. So complementarity, the effectiveness of acquisitions in driving innovation is a function of the internal knowledge of the acquirer and its similarities to that of the firm being acquired. Complementarity is viewed as key antecedents for M&A performance, and complementarity in terms of size, status, and investments in R&D are supported in the literature as basis for assessing the suitability of a target. So when you're looking at acquiring a firm, you want to look at a firm that's heavily investing in developing their own internal knowledge and capabilities through heavy investments in research and development. And a point I should make here, when we say R&D intensity, we're not just talking about product development. We're talking about business process development, business process improvements, investments in developing ways people operate within the organization and make decisions. The other one is coordination capabilities. Coordination capabilities is the heightened sensing and seizing capability of a firm that gives them a unique advantage and results from strategic structural investments over time. Firms must be organized and managed in a way which enhances this ability to recognize opportunities in the environment and mobilize resources in a coordinated way to achieve the results it requires. So quite often, you'll see firms that are well established, but they struggle with acquisitions. They have the money, that's not the issue. They have the people, but they fail every time they go off to pick them out the gates with a new acquisition. And it might be because they're lacking a subtle capability that is the ability to coordinate effectively, right? The other one is absorptive capacity. Absorptive capacity is a firm's ability to identify, assimilate, transform, and apply valuable knowledge. There's a positive correlation between a firm's absorptive capacity and its level of investments in research and development. That's an interesting point to hold on to. Absorptive capacity is not simply a function of the experience and knowledge of the members of the firm, but also how they are structured to communicate with each other, right? We're going to dive into it a little bit more. So, my conversation with you ends right here for the first part. So I've given you some containers, constructs, that I want you to just kind of hold in mind. And as the practitioners in the field speak with you about their experience, just see how many of the key points that they raise you're able to actually fit into either one of these 5 containers, okay? And I'll come back and show you how they all tie together.
Thank you, Stanley. Our second speaker is Mr. Robert Almeida. Robert values serving, learning, excellence, and integrity. He loves to build and grow businesses and derives great fulfillment from helping a team succeed in serving clients' needs. He's a chartered professional accountant with over 30 years of experience as an owner, operator, and investor in multiple geographies, including Canada, USA, and Latin America, and the Caribbean. This combination of values, skills, and experiences enabled him to lead the creation of Portland Private Equity and serve as managing partner of the AIC Caribbean Fund and Portland's Caribbean Fund, two private equity funds with capital commitments from institutional investors in Europe, USA, Canada, and the Caribbean. In addition to general management of Portland Private Equity, his focus is on the investment portfolio from deal origination to realization. Robert is a director of NCB Financial Group, one of the leading financial institutions in the Caribbean. His background includes portfolio management experience with Portland Investment Council, Inc., and executive experience as a director of AIC Global Holdings, Inc., where he was responsible for their international division. Prior to that, he was a senior vice president at CIBC, a leading Canadian bank, and a vice president at Loblaw, Canada's largest retailer, where he was an integral component of Loblaw's dramatic growth in the 1990s and led the creation and successful startup of President's Choice Financial, a highly successful new banking venture in Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Robert Almeida.
I'm all messed up now. I'm trying to think of the 5 containers. So I'm trying to remember my part of my notes here. For those of you who took notes, I'm going to try and fit this into the 5 containers. Good luck. I warned Stanley ahead of time. There's no way that it's going to fit. The topic here is creating wealth. I've got a title as Creating Wealth Through Acquisitions. We have a relatively, we're an organization that thinks in very first principles and tend to think in very fundamental first principles. So the question we would normally ask, everything in our business is being traded on, starts with the question of, in any situation, is what's the highest value that I can give to my counterpart? That's the most important question that lives in our organization is, what's the highest value that I can give to my counterpart? It starts with Michael Leachin being a financial advisor, sitting across the kitchen table from somebody saying, what's the highest value that I can give to this family? And the answer being, make them wealthy. We'd love to say that we keep coming up with new innovations and new ideas, but most of the time we ask that question, the answer typically comes back the same, which is make the other party wealthy. So whether it be make the family wealthy, make a business wealthy, make a country wealthy, whatever it is, the answer tends to keep coming back, make them wealthy. And so we tend to use that as our rallying cry that says, what are we trying to do? When I thought about mergers and acquisitions, of course the question is, why does anyone do an M&A transaction? And so the answer is we're trying to grow some wealth. We're trying to create some wealth. That's why we do a transaction. So hence the title, Creating Wealth Through Acquisitions. So I'm going to differentiate a little bit between 2 different types of acquisitions, and I'm only going to really talk about one, which is the one that we tend to do. But we've had companies that do the other one as well. So why are you doing the acquisition? And I'll break it down into 2 major components. One is I'm doing something because it's like adding another location. It's a proxy for organic growth. It's buy versus build. So instead of building, I'm buying. But what am I buying? I'm buying more of what I do. So if I'm a restaurant chain, I can buy a chain, another set of places that has 5 locations because I want 5 more locations. But I'm really just buying locations. I'm not trying to buy a business. On the other hand, I could actually be trying to enter an entire new space, sector, geography, in which case I'm buying growth, I'm building growth. Okay, so consolidation versus growth. Term is the one I'm not going to talk to you about, consolidation. Send in the Marines. You're really just buying assets. If you're really just buying assets, you've got to integrate it in, and you've got to integrate it in, it's got to fit into your company. And so I tend to say, my experience would be, you can waste a lot of time finessing those, or you can basically send in the Marines and take it over, because that's really what you're doing. It's just like buying, like I said, you buy a location. What would you do if you took a leasehold on a place? You'd do it your way. You wouldn't sit there and go through a bunch of thought processes about how do we culturally assimilate. On the other hand, growth. What's the highest value? Our question is, what's the highest value that we can give to this company? To the company we're buying, not what's the highest value that we can derive from it. It's what's the highest value that we, the acquirer, can give to the target, because we're buying it for some intangible value. We're buying it because it has some intangible value that we would like to see grow. And it's a new tree that is being planted, and we'd like to see that tree grow. So the question is, what can we do to nurture, to support that tree? A little bit of background on us. When we were looking before an acquisition, so you take a step back, what are we looking for? We have 3 preconditions we're looking for. And the 3 preconditions are we're looking for to create wealth in anything. There needs to be first and foremost, a gap between perception and reality. For those who use more academic language, it's an information asymmetry. So but basically, what does the world think something is versus what is it really? And if there's a gap, there's probably a gap in pricing. So if everybody saw things exactly as they were, there would be no pricing arbitrage, there'd be no price differential. But if there's a gap between perception and reality, then there's an opportunity to create some wealth by either changing the perception to match a better reality, or increasing the reality to be a better reality to create a better perception. The second is we're looking for inefficiency as opposed to efficiency. And the third is we're looking for the dearth of equity capital. I don't want to dwell on this. I could spend a lot of time on this, but really the best thing to do is I usually talk around and say we walk around looking for, don't want to be pejorative, but we walk around looking for things that are not attractive, because we don't want to actually look around for things that are attractive. Whatever is attractive attracts everybody, and therefore there's less opportunity to create value. We're buying something to create value. If we're buying it to create value, we're looking for something where there is opportunity, and that opportunity comes from perception reality gaps, comes from inefficiencies that can be improved, and comes from areas where there's a capital inefficiency. And the relevance of this is, I'll think back to the most important question, which is, what's the value that we can give to that company? Are we going to help it with a perception reality gap? Are we going to help it with improving its efficiency? Are we going to help it by bringing it capital that it didn't have access to otherwise? So similar to how Stanley talked about constructs, that was a construct. Part of that construct, I'm going to give you another construct. We operate under the basis that there are 3 key requirements for any business to succeed, for any professional to succeed, for any career person, professional, business, whatever it is, the 3 conditions, 3 things you have to do to succeed. First and foremost, you have to build the best reputation possible. Again, put it into, it's like building the best brand. You have a reputation, and you enhance that reputation. You want to aspire to be a person who's known by only a first name, right? As opposed to a person who has a first name and a last name. So you want to be Madonna or J-Lo or something like that. Cher, yeah. So that's what you want to have a reputation for something, and it's got to stand out. Which kind of gets us to the second point: is it needs to be differentiated. So the second thing any business does, any professional does, is it's not enough. You don't want to be the same as everybody else. You have to stand out from everybody else. You'll be known for your differences. Sameness is the price of entry. Difference is what has value. And thirdly, a business has to truly address customer needs. Truly is really an important word, but we're going to drill into that a bit. So reputation, differentiation, truly address customer needs. When we're looking at an acquisition, we're looking at those 3 things. We're saying, how are we going to help this company enhance its reputation, increase its differentiation, and make sure that it truly addresses client needs. When we buy business, we are not seeking to turn it into an extension, an appendage, or a child of ours. What we're trying to do is we're trying to enhance its reputation, its differentiation, and its ability to meet its clients' needs so that it becomes an outstanding member of our family. We want it to become a strong, it's like, think of a child. The child metaphor here is, I don't want my child to be forever known as the child of me. I want my child one day to be a standalone parent and well-known on their own and build their own branch and their own family tree. Some critical success factors: you got to create focus, understanding alignment, commitment to shared purpose, vision, aspiration, goals. In the interest of time, I'm not going to spend time on this. Second is you got to address an inherent trust deficit. This is important. We'll come back to that. And third, get the right people on the bus. Really busy slides to tell you, and this is what we spend most of our time doing. So it's a really important slide. And when we go into a company, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it more entrepreneurial.
Principal investment vehicle focused on asset classes ranging from middle market private equity and commercial real estate to insurance and asset-based lending. Originally from Trinidad and Tobago, Damian is a 2006 graduate of Harvard Business School with an MBA focused on international finance and a 2001 summa cum laude graduate of South Carolina State University. Please help me welcome Damian Dunham.
Hi, good evening. Be safe like that, I'm wondering. So I wanted to first of all start off by addressing students in the room. I think that a forum like this often doesn't, it kind of spends time talking about the rationale for certain transactions, why we do things, what NCB is doing, what's happening in the industry. And it doesn't address the student component. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. And effectively, what can everyone hear me? Effectively, what M&A is basically a company deciding that they can integrate something externally, or they can solve a problem that they have without the resources that they have in-house. At NCB, we were facing, actually, I'm gonna write this down. So I'm gonna put some competition. I'm going to put some points on the board and just talk about them a little bit in the context of financial services and NCB in particular. So, competition in financial services has increased exponentially. If you ask anyone who was in the business in 2002, when NCB was acquired, or even prior to that in the 1990s in Jamaica, you ask them, what spreads were in the banking industry, the difference between where banks borrow money and where they lend money. There was a lot of opportunity for banks to flourish. Spreads have come in amazingly to the point where the whole infrastructure that a lot of banks have built just doesn't apply anymore. So there's fierce competition in the banking industry. And it impacts the ability of banks to be able to run their business the way they run them in the past. All right, so this is, for those who can see this is new entrants. So the banking industry is interesting because its new entrants are not limited to traditional new entrants. So yes, it is true that JN, for instance, now has a banking license. Different companies are offering different kinds of banking services. We have a burgeoning microfinance sector with companies like Access. So when you talk to someone about where you go to get a loan, that list is a lot longer than it used to be. And that is something that, thank you, that's something that that banks are realizing have to contend with, but more importantly, customers are realizing. People tell me I have a doctor's handwriting, bad handwriting, but that word is suppliers. Effectively, what banks do is banks borrow money and then lend it out at a spread. Or they take in money, they have a cost of funds and a cost of how they get money, and lend it out at a rate that is hopefully high enough to cover the cost of running the business. The suppliers who provide a bank with money, so the money markets and sometimes governments, have become a lot savvier and have become, and the spreads that they offer have compressed a little bit. What does that mean? That means that for banks, the cost that they get money at is higher, but they don't have the ability to pass on that cost to customers. So their industry, in terms of the power of their suppliers, is a lot, it puts banks in a worse position than they were 20 or 30 years ago. That word is customers. The power of customers in financial services has done nothing but growing. So if you look at your ability, for instance, to do something simple like open a bank account. I opened my first bank account when I was 13 or 14. And when I was growing up in Trinidad, there were probably about 3 banks that I could go to. And now in terms of opening an account that allows me to hold deposits, have a card, make point of purchase, there's probably 8 banks I can go to. 4 non-banking financial institutions, and then all kinds of credit unions, all kinds of proxies in between. So the choices that customers have has increased their savviness and has made them more demanding and has given them more power. The last thing I'm going to talk about is substitutes. So one of the things that's happening, particularly on the payment side, is you have the evolution of things like Apple Pay, and in Trinidad they have something called WePay, which Republic Bank, the largest bank in Trinidad, just made a large investment in electronic payment platforms that allow you to make payments, to pay bills, to do debits, to pay your rent. All without touching a traditional banking center. So there are a lot of substitutes to where you can be financed, where you can hold money, where you can make payments, to the extent that banks haven't seen before, and that has again caused a lot of pressure on banks. For the academics in the room, you'll recognize this. Yeah. There's 5 forces. And that is something that I think all of them have acted in concert over the last 20 years to make it a very challenging environment for banks. Let me talk about NCB in particular. So from 2002 to when I joined NCB in 2014, NCB had done an excellent job of, as Rob had alluded to, of presenting itself as not necessarily an alternative to Scotia, but an innovative banking platform within the context of the Jamaican economy. Had created tons of value, but had found itself by 2014 in a situation where it was earning the vast majority of its revenue and net income in Jamaican dollars. That currency was under normal circumstances declining versus the US dollar. So to a certain extent, the bank was running up and down escalator. One of the solutions that management had identified to that was, how can we diversify revenue away from Jamaican dollars? How can we enter new territories? How can we basically become an exporter? And that was effectively my job coming in. So one of the first acquisitions we looked at was Clarion Bank. Why Clarion? So this was an opportunity to buy the third largest bank in Bermuda. For those of you not familiar with the Bermuda market, very mature banking market, albeit a very small population. They have about 66,000 residents full time. So I tell people it's about the size of New Kingston, not Kingston, New Kingston. But the population is extremely wealthy. They have one of the highest per capita incomes in the Western Hemisphere. And the Bermuda banking industry, the economy in general is a well-recognized international business hub. They refer to Bermuda as the sort of king of insurance and reinsurance, and also business services. So a lot of internationally recognized companies are headquartered there. But so they had this very mature banking sector, very well regulated, very wealthy population, and internationally recognized business and banking environment that NCB saw as an opportunity to take the best of what they have and the scale that we could offer, and also use it as a hub to build out wealth management in the Northern Caribbean. And then the deal that has probably been in the news most is the Guardian deal. So Guardian Holdings is the largest insurance company in the region, headquartered in Trinidad, but with a touch point in 23 territories across the region. Guardian was a little bit of a challenge for NCB, particularly because even though we own 100% of Advantage General, and we have a captive life insurer, NCB Insurance. We are by and large banking lunkheads. So the prospect of going into a mass insurance company across the region in territories like the Dutch Caribbean, and Curacao, speak English, and have a different regulatory framework, was a little bit daunting. But the difference that Guardian made is that if you are making the argument that you want to diversify your Jamaican dollar revenue, and you have the opportunity to enter 23 different territories by writing one check, that is an opportunity that you just can't pass up. That deal was so large that we actually had to do it in two parts. We had to do what's called a toehold investment for 29.9% initially, and then after a period of about 2 years, increase that stake to 62%, and now the majority owner of Clarion. What does that mean for the business? It means that the NCB now has a platform to enter basically any territory we want in the English and Dutch-speaking Caribbean, with an established brand name that's well regarded. Guardian now has the opportunity to leverage, in my opinion, the best banking platform in the financial services industry in the region, and I would argue a world-class banking platform, and we have the opportunity to be a truly pan-Caribbean financial services conglomerate. I think Guardian was probably the closest proxy to that, but if you look at sort of the companies that have transcended the region, the Sandals of the world, the Grace Kennedys, I would venture to argue that nobody's tried it in financial services, and that's what we've tried, and I have had the opportunity to be a part of. So I'll just close by saying, as you look at the M&A landscape in the region, I think that there's a ton of opportunity. I'm not giving away any secrets here, but historically, what used to happen in the region is we used to sit down and wait for a check to come from Canada. We used to sit down and wait for the Scotias and the RBCs of the world, and the CIBCs, to come in and buy financial services companies, run them from Toronto, generate a healthy risk-adjusted return, And that would create value, it would create employment, I'm not knocking that at all. What's happening now though is if you are a risk manager sitting in Toronto, and you're looking at the world, you look at the Caribbean and you think that the region is too small and it requires too many resources for the risk-adjusted returns that I would earn there, right? Normally the Caribbean would probably be insulted by that. I'm not, because I think that given that we live here, we get the opportunity to create that value here ourselves, right? We have some crazy Canadians who do still invest, but we get the opportunity to create those outside values. There are inefficiencies in our market that don't exist anywhere else in the world that allow us to exploit these markets. If you look at how the JSE has performed, I think that's a big testament to corporate Jamaica doing amazing things on their own, finding sources of capital, finding business partners, finding new business opportunities, finding new customers, that, you know, if somebody wants to say that they're de-risking the region and they don't want to be here, I say have at it, because there's more opportunity for me. So I'll close with that, and would love to get questions or just kind of have an interactive conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Damien. I'm now going to invite Stanley to come back and tie everything together that we have heard.
It's an impossible task. But let's see if I can bring the connections together for you. So let's go back over the conversation. Robert started out and he spoke about a few important things, right? From memory, we're talking about the basis for which he selects opportunities. He has to be able to identify some differentiating feature. What are the other two, Robert?
Well, we had basically looking for perception reality gap.
Perception of reality gap to identify value, differentiation,
reputation,
and reputation.
And that's fine.
All right, do you remember what was on Robert's last slide? What did he say you must watch out for?
Culture.
Cultural changes. What else? He had reputation there, I think, too. Yeah.
Trust deficit.
Trust deficit. All right. How did he describe fixing trust deficits, for example? Do you recall? Shoulder to shoulder collaboration, right? All right. Let's see if we can kind of bring things together. Can we get the All right, great, thank you. Try not to fall asleep on me now. Right. So what I'm sharing with you here is a two-stage model. Now this two-stage model came out of conversations, multiple conversations, similar to what you just experienced with Damien and Robert, right? From folks across. And even though, I didn't talk about what Damien talked about, what Damien pointed to, not so much the reasons for how to make acquisitions work, we can dig that out of it. He more talked about the motivations, right? 5 forces, competition, substitute products, new entrants, so on. Those things are motivation. That drives firms to go and look for somebody to buy, to expand their market share and grow. But he didn't get into the how and the what's required to make it work effectively. But the conversations will come out in the question and answer. But thinking about what Robert touched on, here is a model. And I'm using the same constructs that I asked you to kind of lump ideas in, right? This model looks at two things. It looks at the firm, which is the firm that's doing the acquiring, and it looks at the target, which is the firm that is about to be acquired. And there are some things that you really have to spend some time with. In the first stage, we evaluate the internal capabilities of the firm and the firm's most rational strategic choice. Remember, we talked about absorptive capacity, which is here. We talked about internal knowledge and coordination capabilities. All right. Internal knowledge is a function of experience. My personal experience, in acquisition, the experience of partners that you might engage with, the KPMGs and PwCs and the Deloittes of the world and so on, consultants or advisors that you might talk to the bank. You build your internal knowledge of the target, the market you're going after, products and services. But for you to have high absorptive capacity, you need something else, coordination capabilities. Coordination, the ability for people to work together is based on what? Trust. People can't work together effectively if they don't trust each other. The only way you can develop and close that trust deficit that Robert talked about, however, think about your own departments or offices. When somebody new comes into your department or office, you have to work with them for a while, see if they're true to their word, work on problem solving with them, and you develop trust. You develop an ability to communicate freely, to say, I agree or I don't agree. And that ability, believe it or not, allows you to make better decisions. You have your two heads better than one, three heads better than so on, right? The problem is, when you get past a dictatorial situation like a Steve Jobs environment where one person calls a shot and the organization grows into one that has multiple stakeholders and is widely held, that firm is still expected to perform. To perform effectively, it has to be able to have trust in the organization that allows people to work together and build. What I found when I started talking to firms who are doing acquisitions and mergers, this piece came out as a very important piece. The ability to work with, collaborate, and coordinate. All right, so a firm might have the resources to buy another firm, but if that firm doing the acquiring does not know how to work together effectively as an organization, it is not possible for it to extract full value from the target being acquired. Am I making sense? Because there are relationships that have to be formed with that target in order for you to extract the value. And there are connections in your own organization that have to work seamlessly to be able to realize value. And if you don't have that coordination capabilities, you don't function. So when I rank the companies in terms of their performance with acquisitions, what I found was that those firms that had a structure that used cross-functional teams to solve problems, they're democratic in nature, but they use cross-functional teams, and not just cross-functional teams for high-level decisions, cross-functional teams in their day-to-day activities. Those firms have a higher level of coordination capabilities than a firm that doesn't. And when it comes to acquisitions, those firms with that higher level of coordination capabilities extract value much better and much faster than the firms that don't. Is it making sense? All right. Now, the model says, where you have high absorptive capacity, you can grow organically or you can grow through acquisitions. The world is yours. You can make the choice you want. Where absorptive capacity is moderate or low, however, stay away from acquisitions because you're going to run into trouble. You're going to run into the 4, 5 year, 6, 7 year stretch of stress and changing CEOs and changing managers and so on. Because in the process of acquiring and integrating, you're running into some coordination issues that you don't, muscles that you need to perform, you don't have them, right? So where you have high absorptive capacity, acquisition is right for you. Where it's moderate or low, grow organically, focus on internal innovation. Stage 2 of the model. This now says, what are the characteristics of the target, the potential partner that you're looking to acquire? And how complementary is that target to you? And the complementarity goes across a few different spectrums, right? So it says, where the degree of complementarity is high and absorptive capacity is high, acquire. It's a good fit, right? But complementarity has to exist across a few very important places. I'm going to use a word everybody likes to use frequently, culture. You have to have complementary culture. What does that mean? I've had conversations with CEOs and they say we're running into trouble because the culture, we're just a culture fit, a culture clash. When you talk about it at that high level, you can't solve it. Culture comes down and this is my carefully considered view, right? Culture comes down in any organization to three things. It comes down to one of the things that Robert had on this slide, the last point about watch out, communication. It comes down to processes, and it comes down to values. Where you have misalignment on values, you're dead. If you're looking at an organization to acquire, but the values aren't aligned with yours, don't waste your time unless you're going to call in the Marines. That is, you're going to just gut the business and put your own management team in there and run, right? But if you're not going to be gutting it because the human resources are important here, you have to look at the communication style. They need to be complementary to yours, and the processes. The business processes have to be complementary, have to complement yours. Now, I said that with values, you'll change. You have to just change, use a marine tactic, change. With processes and the communication style, though, you can adapt. So you can acquire a firm that might not be fully aligned with yours in terms of its business processes or its style of communication. And if you have the absorptive capacity and internal experience to recognize that those two things are important, your integration plan from day one is going to be focusing on programs that fix that gap, right? And you'll do better. So you want to look for firms that are complementary to yours. Where that is high, you acquire. If your absorptive capacity is high, but complementarity is moderate, you might still acquire. You're going to have some trouble. Recognize that you're going to walk into some trouble. But you may still acquire as a strategy. But where it is moderate or low, leave acquisitions alone. That's what the model basically says, right here. So where complementarity is moderate, and your absorptive capacity is moderate, grow through innovation. Low, you grow through innovation. Now, what if you're looking at a target and you realize that this target is a company that has some unique capabilities that I must have in order to leverage for the future, but you're not yet at the level in terms of either internal knowledge or coordination capabilities that you need. You can invest, and that is where the investments in research and development, the designing and building processes becomes important. So, let's say you have a 10-year plan and you want to integrate with an organization that you spotted, and it's happened. I mean, in Grace Kennedy, one of the companies we acquired in the UK some years ago is a company that we were working with years before that, right? Years before that. And eventually we got to the place where we acquired. So you can actually see an opportunity out there that you want to take advantage of, and but you might not be ready to at the time, because either their technology is a little different, their business processes aren't where they need to be, or they don't have managers in your organization who can function in that environment. You're focused on building out your business, your team capabilities by investing in processes, training, developing your staff so that they're eventually ready to do the acquisition for it. All right, so I kind of tied some of it together. Now we're going to open up for discussions. We'll take the questions and answer as best as we can.
Thank you again, Andy. So, now we're going to open the floor for questions to our presenters, speakers, and so now the floor is all yours.
I saw a hand there.
I can see closer. All right. Excuse me. Use the mic. Use the mic. I'm recently, I'm kind of new to this, and I've heard of this phrase called goodwill. How does it apply to companies that you are seeking to acquire? In terms of what kind of value did they add to the books? Is it something tangible or intangible?
Alright, so most of the examples I would use are going to be from banking and financial services. So for just as so traditionally, goodwill is basically the difference between what a company is worth and the value of its identifiable assets. So, you know, if you have an equity, if there's a value for the company, but you broke it up and sell off all the parts and you got something less than the value for the company, that difference is goodwill. Where it manifests itself in financial services and for us in particular, I love to pay below book value for banks and financial assets. I just do. So if you show me an asset and there's any kind of stress or any sort of issue in the economy, I will try to pay below book value. That is difficult because it means that the sellers of that company are going to take a loss on day one, but it allows you to basically mark it up to book on the day you buy it, right? So I used to have a boss in New York who used to say, you don't make money when you sell a stock, you make money when you buy it. And the benefit of goodwill when you buy below book is an immediate bump the day you buy it, and it allows you to make a lot more decisions and do better. Those are rare, but it's hard. So effectively what you're trying to do, and what Rob probably spent 90% of his time doing, is figure out how to increase enterprise value every year, over and over, as much as he can. But effectively that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I'll just, I talked about the two purposes of acquisitions, right? One is basically consolidation, you're buying assets, and the other is you're buying a business, you're buying issues. And I would just, another way of saying it, in one case you're buying tangibles, in the other case you're buying intangibles.
Yeah.
So we like to buy, like David, if I can buy tangibles cheaper than their value, it's fantastic. Like that's the first thing. But what I say is if you are going to pay goodwill, know that you're buying goodwill, which means you're buying something intangible.
The customers have never seen it.
And you do not want to kill what you just bought by deciding that, you know what, we just bought their way of doing things, we paid more than the value of the assets, but now I'm going to tell them how to do it my way. Because I just destroyed the very thing, I stand the risk of destroying the very thing I just paid for. So I would suggest to you that if you're paying goodwill, if you're buying goodwill, be really conscious.
Retain it.
Yeah, exactly, retain it. Be conscious that you're buying goodwill. And therefore you have to figure out how to nurture it, grow it, and harvest and reap the benefits of that goodwill. But otherwise you're just buying assets. Know that you're buying assets, and like Damien said, buy the assets cheap.
One thing I would add, if you want a real-time case study on that, there's a book that just came out about 2 months ago called Ride of a Lifetime. It's the CEO of Disney, and it's him talking about his career. His name is Bob Iger, I-G-E-R, and the book is called Ride of a Lifetime. And one of the things he talks about in that book is how and why they bought Pixar. And a big part of the Pixar acquisition was Disney's animation business was failing. They couldn't fix it, and they saw an opportunity to buy it. But the market would say, oh, okay, this big company with a failing animation business buys Pixar, that's the end of Pixar. Pixar's going to die. And you kind of see how they thought about that and how they managed it. So very good read.
Further to the point, there's one of the participants in the study I did, 30 years of experience. The guy was very adamant. He says he's not paying for goodwill. He's not doing it, right? Because when you apply a value and price it into the deal for something that's intangible, the moment you overpay for a target, you're going to be forcing that business to operate at a level that it might not be able to sustain. So he says quite clearly, look, if I can't bring it down to dollars and cents, I'm not touching it, and I'm not paying for goodwill. Right? So you have to be conscious of that. But the point that Robert made about once you're buying if you're not just buying assets, if you're buying an organization with people and with reputation, customer relationships, and so on, you are buying goodwill. You're buying a reputation, you're buying expectations from the market. And the point he made about managing that to make sure that you don't destroy it is very important.
Interesting presentation, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I heard all that you have said about acquisitions and mergers. I came trying to understand how a small business might get into all of that. I'm looking at my business and I'm thinking, to grow organically to where we want to go, we would have to do it over a long period of time. We thought that acquisition would have been one of our options going forward. We don't know anything about it, so I thought I'd come and hear what's happening here this evening. But what I'm hearing is a framework which calls on a lot of research, consultants, I would say, and it just, to my mind, suggests to me that the thoughts my company is having of growing in that manner might not be realistic. So, is it something for the big boys and the big boys only? How do I identify who would prospect? What would be as a small business? I suspect as a large NCB goes out and hire the best merger and acquisition personnel they could find.
Couldn't find him, so they had me.
And that's all I got on but where am I in that?
Yeah, all right. So it's a very good question. And that's the reason why research is so important. The purpose of academia is to help you develop the answers to questions that you probably wouldn't be able to solve. When Damon went through Porter's 5 forces before he said what it was, folks knew what it was, right? And there's a way to think about responding to threat of substitutes and competition and institutional environment that's come out of research. So you don't really have to reinvent the wheel. If you think investing in a little advice is expensive, try acting without it. You're not here that you don't know. So I'll tell you, when it comes down to making for small firms, and this particular study was important for the Caribbean region for just that, because there's a perception that, look, if Apple decides to buy a company for $1 billion in the US, with the size of market they have, they can lose that $1 billion in 5 years and still be alive. If a small company, let me put it a different way, if a company relatively large like Risk Kennedy were to invest $1 billion, you couldn't think of it, right? So what are the things that we have to be aware of when we think about the strategic option and be cognizant of it so that we can make informed decisions. That's the idea of the model. So let me show you something here. Here's what practitioners, people like Daniel and others, will say to you as an organization thinking about acquisition. We're talking about the things you need to do. You hear due diligence when you talk about acquisitions, right? For somebody that's just starting out, this says in terms of your due diligence, you have to pay attention to a few key things. If you're looking at buying a company, you must do pre-acquisition immersion. In other words, you don't have the chance, you don't have the opportunity of doing it and failing and trying again. So if you're looking at the target, you'll spend time in that target, with that target, understanding how they operate, how they communicate, how they collaborate, the extent of which processes are developed or not. If it is a one-man shop, who is the one man I need to make sure is in the shop when I buy so the shop can keep running? If it is not a one-man shop, and it depends on who are those persons and how do they work, and what kind of management style are they accustomed to. If I'm going to keep them on and I'm going to take it over, and my disposition is different, am I going to destroy value or retain it? So it says engage technical experts. So you have to get that right. There's no two ways about it, right? Benchmark realistic targets, assess the customer base, so on. Consultant use, you have to make sure that you use consultants to access and transfer technical knowledge when you're doing the integration. So the model and the ideas behind it are designed to prevent you from having to do the work yourself from scratch and making the mistakes. So yes, the model is for small firms, and I think it's particularly relevant for companies like us in the Caribbean who don't really have the resources to fail 2 or 3 times.
I warned Stanley ahead of time that he'd be provocative. So if you think through a few of the principles, so I worked at Loblaw, which is Canada's largest retailer, ran corporate development in a company that would not do acquisitions. We ended up doing a couple of acquisitions. When I joined Michael each he asked me, he says, well, I invest in businesses, I buy businesses. I said, well, I haven't bought too many businesses, so I don't know what I would do for you. So he said, did you ever add a warehouse? Did you ever acquire another store, like build another store? Did you ever get another truck for distribution? Did you ever do any of those things? And I said, yeah. He said, well, every one of those is an acquisition. There's no difference. Every one of those is an acquisition. So if you apply the same principles to those, you'd be able to fix it. And the other thing, then the next thing he said was, how do you make decisions? And I said, big decisions very quickly. And he said, really? I said, yeah. And that was when we actually had a meeting of the minds. I said, when I met my wife, I knew pretty quickly that she was the one. I said, if it took me 6 months to figure out that she was the one, she was not the one. I'll just put that into a little bit more context on because you can't, what Stanley just said, you can't afford to fail. And so one of the folks I worked for at Loblaw said that he said you want to do an idea, you want to pursue something that if you royally screw it up, you have to pursue really great ideas, really great opportunities. Because if they turn out 1/3 as good, they'll still be great. And so the answer is that there is risk in there, but you're focusing on, Buffett would say, focusing on the fat pitch. And so I think you can do it. I think you have to focus. The risk would be is that you try and do too many. But so it's about focusing a bit more, making sure that you're doing it with people you can work with, that you can actually trust. So that's why I use the marriage analogy. Somebody you actually feel, I can actually get along, I can trust this person. Hopefully there's some background in there that you actually know you can trust the person, but there's some history in there. And probably the one place where I will disagree is, and it's not disagree on don't use experts, but if you're gonna put your business at risk, don't trust an expert. Don't trust an agent. Because it's what I showed up there, there's the manager. It works, they may get paid more. It doesn't work, they still get paid. You go bankrupt. So you cannot trust, you cannot abdicate that. You have to do it, you have to make sure that you do it yourself. Make use of experts, but never abdicate the responsibility. So the three things are, you have to own it, you can't do it all. So focus. and try and choose one where you've got, as Stanley's words are, because what you're basically saying is, hey, I don't have absorptive capacity, use the words. So what his answer was is therefore you need to focus a lot more on complementarity. And in getting complement says, I need to buy somebody or a company or a part that where I can trust the people, where or at least I can trust the person. I have some way of knowing that it's the right one. But if I don't have that, I'm not a big company that has lots of absorptive capacity. So financially or human resource wise, so I can't afford to waste my time. I gotta focus on the right one, but you can do it. Gotta focus on the right. We do it all the time. We're buying businesses that we know nothing about. But knowing the parties who we're going to work with is really, really important, and focus is critical. We do not try. Like when I hear people say they're doing like 10 acquisitions, like God bless you, we do 2 a year. We do, and that's our full-time job. We're not running a business at the same time. So you can do one, but it is a good way to grow quickly. So they not just grow and focus. Focus is important. Use agents, but do not abdicate it to them at all. Yeah, absolutely.
And another one quickly, just how do you, in such an informal economy as we have here, in more developed economies, you go to the stock market, you identify a company that is a good prospect, and you can start acquiring by buying shares. We have much more informality in our arrangements in Jamaica. How would we identify these prospects?
This is ask the guy beside you. This is what we do. This is what we do for a living. Is we don't buy publicly listed companies. We buy private companies. You go around, you meet people, and you talk, and then you find somebody that you like and you trust, and you build up a rapport.
Can I buy your business?
I'm gonna get you can't buy my business. But you can't, and we don't buy people's businesses. So actually, that's another point. We don't actually buy people's businesses. We look for folks that we're happy to work with, that we're going to, but we don't want them to 100% exit. They may want to stay in for 20%, they may want to stay in for 80%. We don't really care. But we'd like them to stay in the business because we're not buying to just bolt it on. We're buying a business that we'd like to see grow. So so it really is a chemistry thing of knowing the people who unless you've got the absorptive capacity to bolt it on, you gotta know who your partner is going to be.
One quick thing I'll say on consultants and sort of one of the rules of business you'll hear people say, Patrick is going to say a lot, is to resist proxies, right? So what he means by that is to not chase the substitutes of success. One of the areas I think where you can buck that a little bit and look for proxies is with consultants. Now, established fact, you don't have the ability to pay a high price consultant, right? But you have the capacity of, the brain capacity of Mona School of Business professors who are, will be excited to learn about whatever your business is, and right? That's you can. I have a friend in South Florida who has a small paper shredding business, and the business does $500,000 US a year, and by the time he pays everybody, it's not that much money. But he has a board of directors, and he's been able to pull sort of very sharp business minds to help us. So he has the brain power of a McKinsey without the McKinsey fee. So always be on the lookout for proxies for that expensive thing.
May I just invite those with questions to just go to the mic so that we can have an easy flow of the questions.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. One of the things we try to do at Mona School of Business is engage, particularly our graduate students, with enterprise. And that can provide great value. But a lot of people don't realize the power of academia. I think we're all theoreticians.
I'm part of the program. Just
Yes. And it's something that I would encourage those who run business. I mean, I'm from the private sector. People mistake me for academics. I'm proud I can afford it. But I'm really in business. That's how and you know, Dave and I laugh when you said professors, because I'm on a program now to see how we can get faculty on board.
Hi, good evening. I have two questions. The first one is the pre-merger or pre-acquisition. So you're in a company and you have a long-term strategy which drives your desire for an acquisition in a certain area. So you may have certain targets that you're looking at. And those targets may not even be aware that you're looking, and you do some due diligence. And then the day comes when you engage this target. And this target may have a, varying willingness to be acquired or to merge. And on the day that attention is drawn to them, what tends to happen is that the price tends to go up, right? And how do you balance this in what you do? How do you manage that? Could you give some strategies in terms of how to manage that? And at what point does the term hostile takeover gain relevance? That's the first question.
If I'm gonna answer your question. We don't like, so we won't buy anything that's being auctioned. So remember I went through our three preconditions is look for things where there's perception, reality gap, a shortage of equity capital. So basically you're looking for things where there isn't going to be a lot of price competition. Second thing is that I don't think we ever want, unless it's a bolt-on, where you're going to fire everybody the next day, we don't want to do a hostile takeover. We want to do takeovers where we want to do acquisitions where they actually want us. So just to go back to the comment of the previous gentleman, one of the things is when you're taking in money, if you need financial capital for your growth, take it from folks who don't just give you money. Take it from folks who can do what Damien said. They can actually give you some help in that. So you can get terms of smart money. So we say we don't really want to do hostile takeovers. It's too hard unless we're going to get rid of all the people. But if they don't really, you wouldn't marry the person who didn't want to get married to you.
Hostile takeovers are very difficult in financial services, particularly because financial services is a people-based business, right? So generally people invest money, borrow from, lend to, put deposits with somebody they have some kind of relationship with, not an entity, right? So, and NCB has sort of been trying to address this, but most people, if you think about a relationship that you love, an interaction with a business that you love, and your interaction is with Joe at NCB, or you have a guy who, and a hostile takeover puts that into jeopardy. I have a little bit of a non-traditional way of thinking, but what I was trying to get at when I was at the podium talking about, I view foreign direct investment, de-emphasizing the region as an opportunity for us. I'll give you another opportunity. One of the things that people in Jamaica don't do is people don't network. They don't. I mean, it's a small country, everybody went to Woolman's and Campion together, so people don't network. I network all the time. I go out and I meet people, I go out for drinks with people for no reason. So if I am in business and I'm looking to buy a business,
The drinks are the reason.
I've probably been talking to that guy for the 4 years that I've lived in Jamaica, and just been nice to him, right? So it takes away this whole the sort of cut and thrust of a normal negotiation goes away because my friend.
Yeah.
Right there, I'm finished, right? And so I take that. So Jamaicans keep not networking, I will do it, and I mean I'd say that tongue in cheek, but you know, to me, that is like, that's leaving money on the table. And then the one last thing I'll say, I heard a CEO say on CNBC once, Stanley talked about culture, communication, and values. Values, I think, are really important, right? So I rather, piece of advice, free advice, go into business with a complete jerk who shares your values before you go into business with a really nice person that has a different value set from you. Let me say that again. Anybody you go into business with, make sure they share your values regardless of whether you like them or not. Make sure they share your values versus, I really like this guy, but we just don't, he doesn't value integrity and I do, but, right?
Just to tap on the point, there are going to be acquisition targets that you're going to have to walk away from. You won't get every deal. The key point, and it's come out several times, is you never overpay. So if you start the conversation and then that person becomes unreasonable in terms of pricing, the last thing you want to do is fall in love with the acquisition, regardless of how many hours or years you spent looking at it. If it is a price above what is value for you, walk away from it. There's no way to fix a bad price.
All right, my last question is, acquisition mergers, it's particular to mergers, right? I'm involved in 2 mergers right now, which are 2 companies coming together in a 50-50 way, so nobody has a majority. And it has had some difficulties, you know, so I wonder if you would advise that in mergers, you always try to have one partner have the controlling vote, or if you have strategies of how you can balance things once we're in this 50-50, have to agree on a board level situation.
I'm not sure if I have advice at this stage. It might have come to be too late. I would, so, to answer your question directly, is a 50-50 merger a good idea if there's high complementarity? If the businesses are highly compatible, if values match, if there's culture, communication, and if the soft stuff matches, it will work. It's hard. Mergers are hard. Like you know, you have 2 companies that they're hard, but I think that I heard another guy say I'm like a quote machine today. I heard a CEO say the other day that the soft stuff is hard. Because, you know, everybody knows you have to go out and make the numbers and perform and run the business. But I think that ideally, if you get to the point of, if you're walking down the aisle, you've assessed complementarity already. You know, and I think so, make sure complementarity is high.
The world will change on you, and whatever you thought today will not be true tomorrow. So if you're 50-50 and decision making is shared that way, and the world is good, and everything you know today is going to be irrelevant tomorrow, then what you need to know is you're still going to be able to make a decision in a context that you can't predict today. So that would say, hey, it's pretty hard to do. So I would suggest to you that, but there are lots of them that work. And I think in the real world, because that's what back to marriage, that's what couples are, right? It's a bit, you know, you're there, there's nobody said I own you or you own me. And it works. And when does it work? It works when you've got common purpose. So what you do have to make sure is that you're partnered for the right reason. It was Hewlett Packard, right? First 2 that won. Why did Hewlett Packard do business together? Packard and Bill Good. They did it because they said first 2, they wanted to work together. Then they figured out what. And so the point was they had a common purpose of what they were trying to do, more qualitative aspiration. And they did it. So then it just becomes so much more important if it's 50-50, that it's who you want to be partners with, that you want to be partners, shared purpose. Not shared vision. Because the vision's gonna change. Vision's gonna change with the world. Purpose has to be common, shared.
Good evening. I'm a part of the management of change class. I'm here today to get a better understanding of what merger is. My question is, how do you guys deal with cultural differences in mergers?
I guess, Doctor, if I tell you a quick story, Damien, so I mentioned Bermuda before. So I used to look through culture. Stanley talked about some very fundamental cultural things. And then there's culture, which is kind of like style, how we do things, right? And so there's culture at the deep level, which is values, core values. I say, oh, you know, we could all have the same core values. We could all believe and do to others as we would have them do unto you. We could all share these values. That doesn't mean we'll have the same stylistic culture. And I'm sharing this with you because Damien and I, we always tell the story, we go to Bermuda. So you go to the Bermuda airport. So Bermuda and Jamaican culture are radically different. You go to the Bermudian airport, and the person who bought shoes in Florida because his shoes broke or something, bought a pair of shoes, comes back and does not go through the line, nothing to declare, goes to the line of duty to pay for the shoes that he's wearing. Now, Damien says, there isn't a person in Jamaica that would do this. And he said, and then the point is, it's like going, but it's a stylistic norm. It's not that the person in Jamaica is dishonest or not. It's just stylistically in the context that would just be contextually crazy to do. But in the Bermudian norm, that is normal. The other one I'll give you is phone calls. For the most part, pretty well most Jamaicans, I can't say all, will answer their cell phone when it rings. First of all, we'll call. People will call and they expect to be answered. Especially if it's the boss. We operate in a culture where that's not the case. You message the person ahead of time saying, are you available for a call? And maybe that's to live in both of those worlds. He'll send me a message and say, are you available for a call right now? And I know that there's no way that's happening in Jamaica. They're just calling and people are talking. And there's an expectation. It's rude if you don't answer your phone. As opposed to it's rude if you interrupt me. And it's just a stylistic thing of, are you being rude when you don't answer your phone, or are you being rude when you do answer your phone? And I would suggest to you that you have to be sensitive to that, because we see that in the Bermuda thing. They might just think you're being rude, or vice versa, we might think they're dead. Because they're like, what the heck, there's no life in this person. But that's just because the person is extremely respectful and polite stylistically, not because they're any more respectful than the rest of us, but their approach. So I would say for culture, there's just to differentiate between the different types of culture, the core value stuff, but you got to watch out for the stylistic stuff that causes us not to like each other, to distrust each other just because of style.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would echo the difference between stylistic and sort of values. The sort of two big acquisitions that NCB has done have been, I would say, the cultures of the countries are vastly different. I think Trinidad is probably closer to Jamaica than Bermuda, definitely, but the cultures are still very different. And the culture but I think there's a shared value. There's a desire to want to run a world-class financial institution. There's a desire to create a financial ecosystem where we have a suite of products that customers think about their financial future, and they think about us, whether they're thinking about life insurance or banking or whatever. So I would say that that's what we honed in on. We like to joke around about I'll give you another, just as he brought up the Bermuda thing. In Bermuda, there is a law that says you're only allowed to have one car. right? Just to manage traffic and stuff. And how they count one car is by lot number. So your house has a lot number, and you're allowed to have one car on that lot. A lot of the lot, people live on plots of land because they're family plots that have 2 lots on it. You have one house on 2 lots. Those people have one car. What is the likelihood that that would happen in Jamaica? People would have cars in their children's name, and their children would drive, and it would be chaos. And they just don't do it. So our approach is like we have a good laugh about that like all the time, and then we talk about how we can run, a good business together. So you can identify the kind of, the similarities, even the sort of common thread, and amplify that, and just make a joke of the difference.
On the culture, one of the reasons why I was very careful to break it down to those 3 components is because it's so important. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we have 20 odd companies in Jamaica operating the same Jamaican environment, all Jamaican firms, Jamaica cultural rule, right? If you go from one firm to another, you're going to find differences in the culture, even though it's in the same country. And that difference is driven by those 3 things that I talked about. What the organization establishes as its core values, the processes that it has in place to ensure that it's accountable and it performs the way it performs, and the communication style. I'll make it even a bit more granular. You can be in an organization that's 100 years old, and you have a transition from one CEO to another. The CEO grew up in the organization, so he knows the culture, he or she knows the culture inside out. They live it, breathe it. But guess what? We're the same business process, but guess what? They communicate a little differently. And what you find over the course of 6 months to a year, the culture starts to shift a little, right? So the point I want to make is, yes, you have an environment with a particular kind of culture, but when you're looking at the target that you're going to acquire, you look for that similarity. If there even is a difference in the way people behave generally, once you join an organization, for example, and the expectations are clear, the processes are in place that make it clear what the expectations are, and you're held accountable for it, and you communicate with folks, you will get the culture that you want. So you manage culture through identifying and focusing on those 3 things: communication, processes, and values. Okay.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for a very interesting panel discussion. So I want to make 2 points. The first, a point, second, a question. So the first is that here at the MSBM, we actually have our graduate programs that involve a key part of that being the field projects. And that allows our graduate students to go into firms and be almost as consultants. So I want to encourage those small businesses here who may be looking for that opportunity. Your students are here, they're excellent value, they'll work with you. And past students as well. So we are here for that, and we're open to assisting in that way. The question, so the literature also speaks to M&A as a step towards innovation and introducing innovation within companies. What are the risks involved here, or just some general comments on that relationship that's assumed that when you want to innovate, you go for M&A as an option for innovation? Thank you.
Okay, before we take the answers to that question, I'm going to just point out that the persons currently in line will just take one more question in addition to those persons there, and that would be it for the question and answer segment. Thank you.
Sorry.
My apologies. So the idea is that this is the end of the line, and we will only take one question each from the persons who are currently here. Thank you.
I forgot your question. Yeah, the innovation. So I think it's you have to please remember, back to the this question about culture. We buy a whole bunch of companies, none of them have the same culture. So we live in a multicultural, Portland is a multicultural group by definition. Commonality of values is really important. So values is extremely important that they're common and shared. Culture radically different in all the different companies. The segue into using M&A as a source of information, because you will not get there's a limit to the amount of innovation you can get internally. There's countries that don't promote it. I don't know my political stance here now. Countries that don't embrace immigration will eventually run into problems. The United States is sorry. The United States is the United States. They can talk about the United States. The United States was the country that took immigrants and a great source of immigration. There wouldn't be a Silicon Valley without all the Indians in Silicon Valley. You wouldn't have all. Immigration is fundamental because all change, and this the academics will tell you, all change happens on the fringe. It happens on the margin. It happens from the outside in. So if you acquire and you dumb them down, you won't get the innovation. You kind of want the so again we're going through this in Canada right now. We're saying we want immigrants to come in and we want them to be Canadian. Oh great, so that's not going to help us. We want immigrants to come in and not be Canadian, because when they come in and they're not Canadian, that's what's going to help Canada stay vibrant. And that's what's been the source of growth. And I think companies are no different. We need to bring in like when we bring in the Damien. Like Damien said, and CB didn't have a Damien before. Damien comes in with a whole bunch of different mindsets and gets allowed to go out and do the two biggest acquisitions that NCB had ever done. So it wouldn't have happened otherwise. Innovation comes from allowing somebody through differences and allowing them to flourish. So the risk is that you acquire difference and then you tell them to shut up.
I think that's a big problem. I mean, I'll cite the Pixar example. That was one of the things they were definitely afraid of. The other thing I'll say about innovation is beware of innovation as a crutch. So a lot of the times you'll see companies and they're not doing a thing and they want to go out and just try to buy somebody to try to do that thing. The best example of that was Blockbuster. So Blockbuster is making all this money from what you call it? But when you don't take it back on time with the
late fees.
Right, so they're making all this money from late fees. So first problem is their business model is punitive to their customers, right? Like that's just a bad idea. Like you make more money, the more unhappy your customers are. Bad idea. But then Netflix comes along and Netflix is like, no, keep the DVD as long as you want. Because that's what Netflix was initially. Netflix wasn't a streaming service. They used to mail you the DVD at that dating method. But they used to mail you the DVDs and just keep it for as long as you want. And so Blockbuster's first reaction was to feverishly go around and look for a technology platform to buy, right? And what they're doing is they're using innovation as a crutch to sort of to bridge the gap on over a truly faulty business model. That is rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. That's what that is. So be very aware. The complementarity question comes into what does this innovation do that I already do well? What does it supercharge? What function do I have that it puts on steroids? I have a customer interaction that's going well, and I can improve it with this innovation. Not just here's something that I never do, or I do the opposite of it with my customers, and the innovation is supposed to fix. That's like buying a gym membership and not going. And it doesn't work. So I say that's a big problem with innovation, where once you start viewing innovation as the solution to your problem and not kind of what it is within, because there's a danger.
Good evening. This question goes to Mr. Robert. From your slide, I've realized that you have mentioned one of the main purpose of acquisition, one of the reasons for acquisition which was growth. And I don't know if you've mentioned if there's any challenges that you have faced doing this purpose of acquisition. That's my question.
Yeah, absolutely. They don't all go well. In our experience, what we've learned is that back is compartmentalizing them. So if we're buying for growth and we're buying for intangibles, to use a word that I understand, because we've tried to codify this. So we now try and get very principled that says, why are we doing this? We're doing this for growth. If we're doing this for growth, what is it that's going to grow? What is it that's going to grow? And why couldn't we have done it on our own? So why are we buying something for growth? If we could have done it on our own, we would have done it already. So when we're buying something for the growth, what is that intangible that we're buying? And let's look hard for that intangible, because once we find that intangible, then we're going to make more of it. But it's implicit in the decision to buy something for growth is you couldn't have done it on your own. You made that implicit decision. So the next thing is saying, trying to dig a little deeper and say, what is it that we're buying? And that's where Michael was saying, it was that deepening, looking, what is it that I'm buying that caused him to say NCB, what we're actually buying is an emotional connection with the country. That is what we're buying. We're not buying bank accounts, we're not buying branches, we're getting all of what we're actually buying is we're buying and we're going to nurture, we're going to try and really grow this thing. People say, what do you mean it's got an emotional connection with the country? At the time it wasn't exactly doing well. But that was the point was, why are we buying a bank in Jamaica? We're a financial group in Canada. Why are we buying? Because we want to grow in Jamaica, and we could not do that on our own by going out and starting a bank in Jamaica. So we're buying something intangible. Now let's go and figure out what it is and nurture it longer. It doesn't, it says it, by being more crystal clear on what is the intangible we're buying. In Chukka, what is it that we're buying? There's a secret sauce in Chukka that they do exceptionally well and create biased here. Go on a Chukka tour, go on anybody else's tour. You'll have a better time on a Chukka tour, and it'll be safer than any other tour. They will take better care of the environment than any other tour. There is something in what Chukka does, in the way they do their business, that is different, and it's not about us drilling that out of them. So we really drilled into the intangible in Chukka. And so keyword would be think about the intangibles. So we get it wrong when we forget the intangible that we bought, or we don't pay enough attention and the intangible we bought really wasn't there. We thought we bought an intangible, but the intangible wasn't there. We just got messed up because all we saw was the tangible assets, and we missed the intangible. So we focus a lot more on intangibles. In our diligence, it's easy to diligence tangibles. That would be one of the flaws. It's really easy to diligence tangibles, but there is no shortage of technical experts who will do it for you, who will do your legal diligence for you, do your financial diligence for you, do all of that stuff for you. The thing is, that's not what you're buying. So we focus, we're buying growth, so we started to try and spend a lot of time trying to diligence the intangible, because that's what we're buying. So how do we minimize mistakes? Is by spending even more time diligencing the intangible as opposed to the tangibles. But when we got it wrong because we got the tangibles right, and we forgot the intangibles, and every one that's gone wrong, we got the intangibles wrong. We got the tangibles right. I can't say that we made a mistake on tangibles, but we had some blow-ups where we got the intangibles wrong.
The only thing I would add to that is the thing that you most expect to go wrong is not going to be the biggest challenge in that acquisition. So if you told me I was buying this bottle of water and write down the 10 things that could go wrong, the thing that will be the biggest problem in integrating that is not on that list. It's something out of that field. That's just how acquisitions are. That's the art in it. And so you just kind of have to be skeptical. You have to poke things and look at why is the investor Ray Dalio talks about, he doesn't ask people, are you sure you're right? He asks them, how do you know you're right? And I think that's the thing that everything that has gone wrong in deals I've done is something I was like, I didn't know that could work. I didn't know that was a thing. That is just not the thing you expect.
I'm going to step back to the innovation question. Did she step out? She did. All right, so on the growth. But on the innovation question that she asked, you run into trouble really, where you acquire a firm for its innovation capabilities, but you don't understand the technology that you're acquiring. Simple, right? The literature says, and when I say the literature, research shows that acquisitions usually, believe it or not, slow down the growth of the acquirer for a period, because you divest, you put in resources into getting something off the ground. So for innovation purposes, you are going to run into trouble if you don't understand what you're acquiring. It's going to affect your ability to grow. It destroy value. On the growth side, you're going to run into trouble with growing your businesses if you don't understand what you're going after and why you're going after it, and those things that you have to look for. So when we talk about internal knowledge, an important point that I need to make is internal knowledge is not just tied to the knowledge of the people in your firm. When you acquire that target, there's tacit knowledge in there that you have to be able to extract to create value, right? Sometimes the growth slips because that tacit knowledge is not fully tapped, or it's sent out the door a bit too quickly, right? And you're into some issues.
I should have said this. So really simple things. I've never lost money investing in a business, other than from those who stole from me.
Oh.
So in every situation where we've lost money, you can pretty well say the person on the other side has figured out how to steal. It's appropriate, whatever. Which kind of gets me on the positive side to the other side. Take a look at the NCB director/officer shareholding list, and take a look at who the new second largest shareholder is in NCB. Sorry? Patrick, yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is, if you're going to focus on growth, there better be something in it for the people who are leading the growth. And so one of the things that I say, focus on the intangible that I missed was, focus on the intangible, the value you're going to create, the growth. But remember where I started off in my presentation, it's what's in it for them. So the question is going to be, is what's this going to do for the acquiring, for the target? How is the target going to get wealthier? How is the target going to feel more fulfilled? How are they going to get their intellectual fulfillment, their spiritual fulfillment, their happiness, their joy, their financial well-being? How are they going to get all of that out of us achieving our growth target? If you can't figure that out, then you run into my first problem. They will steal from you. So I would suggest that that's the other thing we spend a lot of time is trying to figure out how are they, incentives, to get the incentive, because that means when we gain, they will gain, then we're going to be okay. But if it's not that way, human beings, it's not going to, they're going to figure out how to sabotage.
Final question.
So, good night. I'm also a part of the Management of Change class, and this is the topic that we're focusing on now. So my question is, for financial institutions, what are the steps or what do they have to plan for beyond the M&A transactions, and what are unique issues that can arise even after the transaction wraps up or is completed?
Jamie's going to know this one better than me, but I'll tell you, in financial institutions, the number of things that can trip you up that are not in your reasons for doing it. So, for example, you can have an anti-money laundering, you can have a compliance issue that destroys your entire business. So, the issue of financial institutions, you can have reputation is critical. Anything that creates a reputational risk for a financial institution is a disaster. Anything that creates a compliance risk can wipe out your licenses, which crosses over jurisdictions. As soon as you're not fit and proper in one jurisdiction, you're not fit and proper in any jurisdiction. So the compliance type side of the financial institution, locking that down becomes really important because it's like an unintended consequence. You just didn't see that coming. That inside the business you bought with a looming, anti-money laundering charge or something, and you're like, where did that come from? And that's what I would say is one of the things, it's not the reason for why we're acquiring the business. We're focusing on integration and all these other wonderful things, and then tucked away somewhere is just make sure you've picked up all those compliance things really, really quick.
I'm going to ask a question before I make a point. How many people in here have a mortgage? A mortgage. Anybody have a mortgage? All right. Of the people who have a mortgage, how many of you guys have a car loan or some other kind of loan? Are they with the same institution? Yeah, most people said no, right? So what that tells you, what the headline coming out of that, is cross-selling doesn't work. Because most people buy your life insurance is with one company, and my job is to make that not true. So I have failed you, sir, right? Most practitioners and experts will tell you that cross-selling doesn't work. So I would say what is specific to financial services. So people have no problem buying their food and their pharmaceuticals in the same store, right? Like there's other areas of human consumption where cross-selling shouldn't make sense, but it just does, and convenience and all these things. It just doesn't work in financial services. So one of the things that one of the hardest things is after you do the acquisition is how do you make the musicians play together like an orchestra, right? Like because everybody is incentivized in their own way. I have a guy who runs a life insurance business and he gets paid to sell life insurance. I have a guy who takes deposits in the branch and he gets paid to take deposits. I have a guy who sells investment advice and he gets paid to sell investment advice. And as long as you don't get in their way and leave them alone, they're fine. But then you're telling them you need to work with this, when you're selling this thing, you need to sell life insurance, so this guy gets paid and now I'm doing work for him. And so in getting the musicians to play together, to beat the analogy to death, is one thing that is very unique in financial services. I think it's more difficult than other industries. Rob alluded to AML issues and anti-money laundering. I'll give you guys a real life example. So we decided we wanted to take control of Guardian Holdings, and Guardian Holdings was willing, not a hostile bid, right? The way we decided to do it was to make a toehold investment and buy 29.9, and then later on try to find a way to get a majority. We weren't sure how we were going to do it, but that's what we decided to do. This is typical. If you spend 5 minutes studying M&A, you see the structure all along. One of the things that we did was we agreed that we would make an offer to take a majority stake when we bought the first offer. There were people in Trinidad who protested that, and then the regulators decided to delay the deal. There was no way I could have anticipated that. I didn't know. That's one of the things that I didn't know was a thing. I didn't know that was a risk. I didn't think that took 2 years to legislate. I just didn't know that was a thing. So financial services is different because we are very well regulated, and we should be because we take your money. You should know what I'm doing with you. This is not selling popcorn. This is different. This is about when I make a mistake at work, people can't retire, right? This is serious. And so there is a regulatory component that just makes this industry very different from any other industry.
Just to cap it, one of the other big issues for financial institutions, believe it or not, is platform integration. they're selling services. That service is data-based. So if they lose your transaction history or can't port it over to the company that's acquired, then you have a problem. So when you look at financial institutions, in addition to the AML issues, the regulatory issues, platform integration is a sore point. And often they miss it because they may be running a similar platform, but it might be 2 or 3 versions back. And then to come in and update it is an issue. They might look at it in the due diligence process, but when it comes to integrating it, they have integration issues. So that is one other thing to watch for.
David talked about, the life insurance guy makes money doing this, the capital markets guy makes money doing this, each person, this is how they make their money. The people who work in financial institutions that generate revenue are very financially focused. Their success fees, it's an extremely, they do it because they follow the money. So you got a HR system, I guess, it's performance management, salary, bonuses, all of those various things. Paying a lot of attention to that is important. And in particular in Wall Street, they'll tell you that you don't get comp right, you don't get the business right, it's done. Good luck, go home, it's not gonna work, you gotta get compensation right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So just to quickly wrap up, I started out this evening by stating that mergers are in fact like marriages, but that you wouldn't get any marriage advice here. I was wrong. I see we got quite a bit of marriage advice. We got a couple constructs that were highlighted by Stanley. High coordination capabilities, that is true both in business mergers and marriages. And if you don't have this, a part of this is having trust with each other, the ability to work together to realize value, and your decisions are better made when both of you develop trust. That is true in both business and in marriage. Also, that you ought to be complementary and your values must align. You should have strong communication happening. This is true again in both arenas. Communicate. Otherwise, you'll have this distress, usually on the husband's part. But and if you can't do this, then you should work on yourself, right? So before you go and merge with anybody, you choose to grow through innovation, which is work on yourself internally. That's why I'm interpreting that one. And so the fourth point Stanley made was where all of those constructs that are needed for a successful merger are lacking, then you really ought to take a look at yourself and spend money, invest in yourself to increase your internal knowledge and coordinating capabilities and absorptive. So you see all the marriage advice that you just got this evening. Again, Damien said that you are also to network, right? To find possible acquisition targets. So you network before you get married, not after, gentlemen. And finally, Rob put the icing on the cake with saying, how do you make big decisions? Very quickly. He made up his mind quickly when he met his wife. Otherwise, gentlemen, you know how it is. Somebody else will take care of you. So you don't want that to happen. So we did get 2 for 1 this evening, a double whammy. Let me just, invite Mr. Robert Meader to come forward, and we would like to present a gift for taking the time to sit with us. Thank you. Okay. And all the presenters actually. Let's try to. This is fine? Okay, great.
What turn
Third to you. All right, great. Take an instructions. Thank you, Rob, for coming and sharing with us. I'm sure everyone here that came is quite appreciative of the informative experiences that you've shared with us, and we can't say thank you enough for this experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
We also want to thank Damien, our Trinidadian brother, who has brought so much caravan experience the evening. We want to say, really, we learned so much from what you had to share with us, even from our own national perspective with NCB. Really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to come. And finally, to the person who made it all happen, Dr. Stanley Beckford, we appreciate the time that you took to share with us what you have learned over the years that you've been doing your research. We know that's very, very difficult and very, very hard. And we thank you for sharing some of the benefits that you bring with us. Thank you so very much. So, in closing, I would like to thank our speakers again. I just did that. I want to also thank our sponsors, our sponsor, Grace Kennedy, our planning committee, especially Stanley Bedford for conceptualizing the event. And congratulations again on your newly minted doctoral award, right? And we want to also thank the MSBM marketing department, Janice and her team. We want to thank the technical support team, the facilities team, and all of you, especially here that attended. It would not have been the same without you. Thank you so very much. We invite you to have refreshments outside and network. Have a good evening.